morning, everybody. It's Stephen here for the Idiot Quilter, and I want to show you a mess. Yes, a mess. So, a year ago, I bought this pattern called the Solstice Star. Now, any kind of pattern that has a star in it, I'm attracted to. And I saw this one, and I was doubly attracted to it because it had a star in it, and it was using a fabric line by Northcott that I really like called Stonehenge. And this was actually part of their Stonehenge series called the Solstice series, I guess. And there's a lot of fabrics in this. There are 10 fabrics in it. And I had to search to find enough of this fabric because it was so popular a year ago because Northcott was marking their 10th anniversary of coming out with this line of fabric. And so they had a challenge going on, a contest that you could win a trip to Stonehenge in England based on a quilt that you had designed with their fabrics. Now, I wasn't going to enter the contest, but I did like this design, but I needed those fabrics. So I went around to a lot of different quilt stores all over the place, and I eventually collected enough pieces. I organized the pieces into a project box, I labeled them, ready for cutting, and there it sat for almost a year. Now, I have to admit this pattern was a little bit intimidating when I first saw it. So, the other day, I decided to pull it out and work on it. I figured at this point in time, my skills as a quilter had developed far enough that I should be able to handle this, even if it had Y seams, because I have done Y seams. So, I get the fabric out and I start cutting it and laying it out and getting all the pieces labeled and ready to go. So I start the sewing process. Now, it was a bit of a slow thing, and you start in the center here and start assembling this area. Well, that's where things went awry. I got the various triangles together, but look at that centerpiece. The center is a mess. I even have a hole in it because of the number of times I ripped it out. So then I thought, okay, you'll notice there are these squares, and these are to be sewn on the outside. I have two of them that happen to be sewn already on. I wasn't really sure how to sew those in there. I think I figured it out, but it was a bit of a pain in the butt. And then I started to get tucks. And I started ripping that out. And one thing led to another, and I thought, this is giving me pain. I'm done with this. I give it in, I throw in the towel. I'm not advanced enough to be able to handle this. But now I have all this fabric that I have cut. And I had these 8 of these medallions that I had to make, which have mitered corners on the borders and the whole bit. And behind me, you can't see it, but I have all of the fabric for this laid out, ready to go. So what to do? I'm done trying to do this. It looks nice to a point, but that center piece really bugs me. Yeah, I could applique something over top of that, and I thought about that. But then when I started putting these squares on, if you'll notice, this one's got a nice border, this one does not have a nice border. And yet, they were cut and put together the same. You see, this is another piece. You cut out this medallion, and then you cut out these strips, and then you mitered the corners, and you got this nice border. But I'm losing part of this border in the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So it's going to look irregular throughout. And I'm thinking, if I'm going to spend all this time on this quilt, I want this one to be perfect. Yeah, it's not going to happen. So I'm going to take you on my journey with me over the course of the next few days or weeks, whatever. By the time you see this video, it will all be done, maybe. And I'm going to redesign this quilt. I am going to use the fabric. I'm going to use some of the pieces and try to salvage some of the pieces that I've already sewn and have been cut and see what I can come up with. Now, I'm thinking of using these as a focal element. And at first I was thinking I could do there's 8 of these, so I could, put sashing in between them, put them side by side in the center and build out. But then I'm thinking that might be a little boring. So I think what I'm going to do is I still have lots of this fabric. I'm going to look at the pieces that I have already cut, and I'm going to see if I can design something that will be the center of this quilt. And then from there, I will add elements to it and work my way out. At least that's my theory. Now, I am an idiot quilter, so who knows what kind of mess this could be. So stay tuned for my reworked Solstice Star quilt. I'll probably have to give it another name if I ever get it done, because it's no longer the Solstice Star. Okay, so we'll see what happens. Okay, so I've redesigned the center part of this using the pieces that I already had cut out, and so this is what it looks like at this point in time. It's going to be sort of scrappy and sort of not scrappy as I work on this. I have to figure out my measurements and what I'm going to do. So now this is going to be my center, and now I'm going to build out around it. And I'm thinking I should probably use some flying geese. So I've made some flying geese, and I'm thinking these will be nice as an addition all the way around. Of course, when you make the flying geese and you don't have a pattern, you've got to figure out how you're going to make them fit evenly, and that's what I'm working on now. So I'll come back and show you what that looks like in a bit. Okay, so now I've added all the way around it, like a border, flying geese. And I had to piece into the corners up here, which I hope is not too noticeable. It would be noticeable if you stood right up here and examined it, but pull it back a little bit so you can see. So there's what I've got now. So I'm going to continue working to the outside, and I had these strips that were cut according to that old pattern, and I think I'm going to put those around as another border out here, and then from there I'll see what I can develop that might be of interest around that part as well. So we're progressively moving our way out, and the quilt is growing. Okay, so I've added another couple of border strips, well, one border strip, a little wider one, and I'll have to move way back so you can see this. So this is what it's looking like right now. So my next stage is to build on this, and I'm thinking I might go for some smaller half square triangles. Now they take a while to make, but I think that might add to this. I mean, I could keep going out with various widths of strips, but I think that's going to get boring. So I want to add something that's a little bit more dynamic here. And half square triangles, I've had a lot of experience making those, so that shouldn't be that difficult, just a bit time consuming. So I have to figure out the mathematics of that, though, how that's going to work. Now, I did check the squareness of this to right now, and it's pretty good. It's 25.5 inches one way, and it's 25.25 inches the other way. And I measured it 3 times, once at the top, once at the bottom, once across the middle, and they lined right up, which I'm really kind of surprised at. I thought I might have to do a little squaring at this point, but it looks like I don't have to. So I'm going to figure out what I'm going to create for the next layer, and we'll go from there. Okay, so here's how far I've gotten with this. You can see on the top, get it all in the shot, on the top and the bottom border I've used those half square triangles, and then my quilt was starting to get a little bit on the square side, so what I thought I would do is I put these thin border pieces with the Celtic knot like print, and I ran those down the 2 sides. So now it's no longer a square, it's turning into a rectangle, and that's what I really want. I prefer rectangular sized quilts over square ones. So I think it's coming along quite nicely, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do next, but I'm going to add to it. It's still not large enough. I want this to be about the size of a probably a twin, so we'll see. So I'll have to think about what I'm going to add to it next, and when I do, I will show it to you. So here's where I'm at the moment. I decided to add a thin border that's in a mottled fabric, but it reads as a solid. Just back up here so you can see this a little better. Because I think I'm getting a little too busy around the outside of the center here, so I thought I'd break it up with more of a solid pattern. Now, what I need to do is, let me just sit down for a second here, trying to keep the wires from getting in my way. I have all these pieces that I have cut like this. These were strip sets, and then they were cut at a 45-degree angle. And the idea of this is these pieces originally was to make the star formation. And I have some larger strips like that as well. These are the leftovers. So I'm thinking, how can I incorporate these into the rest of the quilt? So I'm going to have to think about that, and then I'll show you what I come up with. Okay, so here's what I have so far. So I added this outside border, and I created this top and bottom border with the leftover square pieces and those strip sets that I had. I had to add one extra strip to it to make it fit. And then, again, to separate out those design elements, getting ready for the next layer, I put this thin border all the way around. So it is growing, and the size right now, let me grab a tape measure. And the size right now is about 41 inches by, I don't think I can reach it, I'll have to do a little estimate here, by about 41 by 48 roughly on that. So it's coming along, it's growing. I think I need to put something more now around the outside edges, so I'm going to look at those pieces that I cut for the other quilt and see what I can add to this. But I think it's coming along quite nicely. So here's how far I've gotten on this quilt now. I added this border all the way around with the flying geese. It echoes basically the border that was on the inside. So now at this point, I think I'm up to about, what's my measurements? I'm up to 51 inches this way, 56 inches that way. So I think I'm pretty much getting to the point where this is a good size throw moving towards a twin. And what I'm going to do next is I have cut out from the fabric some of these border strips, and I'm going to put those all the way around. And then I think I'm going to put a wider final border of one of the fabrics. I haven't decided which fabric yet. I think it might be this fabric that's along here, but not sure. And that'll bring it out to probably close to about 60 inches all the way around, and a little bit more, because I am trying to keep this somewhat rectangular, although it keeps lending itself to becoming a square. And that's okay too if it does. And then that will finish up the quilt top. So I'll show you what happens when I add those other borders. Okay, so I've put the last two border pieces on. You can see down here I've got my thin border that has that chain link Celtic-like look to it. And then I put a 4-inch border all the way around with some of the fabric that I haven't really used that much in here, except in little spots on the inner part. So there, I have it all done. As far as size is concerned, I'm not sure. I haven't measured it yet. Let me measure it. So I have it measured, and it comes out to about 64 by 60, approximately. So that makes it a good size throw. I'm not going to make it any bigger than this. That's as large as I'm going to go, and that's fine. So the next thing is to get it layered and quilted, and what I'm thinking of doing is maybe just doing straight old stitch in the ditch with this one. Or I might do some free motion quilting in some of these wider pieces along here. I'm really not sure what I'm going to do. I hesitate a little bit on the quilting part of it because I don't have access to a long arm right now, and plus I'm having some problems with my domestic machines, and that's a video that's already up, and you can check that out about my nightmare Janome 15,000. So for now, though, the top is done, and what started out as a Solstice Star is now, I think I'm going to call it the Celtic Square. Yeah, because these designs remind me of Celtic images. So there you go. You've seen the whole process of where I took something that was a disaster, and I think I've made it successfully into something brand new.